Elijah Williams is my name. I'm 27, single, and work for a well-known corporation. I am 27 years old, single, and work for a well-known company. My parents divorced when I was in elementary school, and I used to live with my mom. Jane Williams, my mom, is 53 years old. She looks young for her age and has a cheerful personality. She could live on my money alone, but she disliked remaining at home, so she worked part-time at a supermarket 4 times a week. She occasionally received free meals or purchased prepared foods at a bargain, and she was quite helpful. She often said to me, "I think it's time you got married." Besides that, I was living a peaceful life. Then one day, a major failure was discovered at the company. The contract documents for a new contract I had signed with the client had been lost. As a result, the contract with the client was terminated. I had assembled the contract-related papers I had gotten from the counterparty and papers for internal use, and I had given them to my boss for approval. However, my boss, Michael, said he had not received them. But I remember I gave them to Michael. All I could think was that Michael was trying to hide his mistake. But nobody listened to me. They reasoned that if Michael, the division chief, did not receive them, I was the one who had lost them and was therefore accountable. Michael's recommendation that I be punished was granted because we lost a critical business partner because of me, and they assumed I had prepared a bogus report. I was removed from my responsibilities and transferred to a local branch office. It was referred to as a demotion in the industry. I told my mother what had happened. She said, "I believe in you. I never raised you to be that way, but this is your life, your destiny. I was treated badly by my ex-husband in the past, too." With that, she laughed. What I'm trying to say is that nobody knows how life will turn out. But honest people will eventually experience good things. If not, it would be unfair. With that said, she tapped me on the shoulder. I was more surprised by my boss's deception than by the demotion. I assumed he was a trustworthy supervisor, but he was actually a self-serving guy. But here I am. It's unfair. Besides, my new job is in a rural area. I have to leave here. Mom, are you going to be okay on your own? Don't be silly. That's exactly what I want to ask you. You've never lived alone before, so I'm more worried about you. Well, I've taught you all the housework, so I'm not worried about that. But it's hard to get along with the neighbors and all that. I hope your neighbors are nice. I hear they're offering company housing. Does the company provide housing for single people? Company housing appears to be a residence for people with families. Unlike apartment complexes, our company does not provide housing for its employees. Instead, it rents out a house to them. That's why people from the company don't gather there. I see. So rather than renting a home, given that you are single, you'll live in an apartment or condo? My new job is in the countryside, so I think it will be living in an apartment. Well, as they say, home is where you make it, so don't be a grouch and keep working hard. Yeah, that's what I plan to do. I never thought I'd leave home like this, but I'll think positively and do my best. I left home and headed for the branch office to which I was to be transferred. As I expected, the company housing they prepared for me was an apartment. It was a square building with a lightweight steel frame and 4 comparable apartments, each with 8 rooms. My room was a corner room on the 2nd floor. I appreciated that there were a lot of windows. I was relieved to discover that the property was newer and cleaner than I had anticipated. I had heard that it was only 1 room with dining and a kitchen for young people, but it appeared to be more large than I had thought. There was an air conditioner, and I was relieved to see that the toilet and bathroom were separate. Although the kitchen was only for 1 person, it appeared to be functional. To be honest, though, I was feeling negative due to my boss's attitude and demotion. But at the same time, I was a little excited to be living alone for the first time. I was concerned at first about getting to know my neighbors, but I believe we both felt the same way, and I was grateful for the easygoing relationship. The only problem was the location of the apartment. The public transportation was insufficient, and the location was far from a train station and resembled an old highway. The branch office was likewise located along the highway, and using the train took longer than I had anticipated. All the other employees commuted by car or motorcycle. I considered purchasing a car, but after doing the math, it was quite expensive, and the maintenance fees would be quite high. Of course, the company pays for gasoline and other expenses. However, parking, taxes, optional insurance, and gasoline were all costly these days. After much deliberation, I decided to buy a little scooter. It was inexpensive to maintain and took up little room. The downside was that it depended on the weather. Riding a motorcycle in the rain, cold, or heat was difficult because your body was exposed. However, surprisingly, motorcycles were fun to ride. Rain and cold are difficult if you believe they are difficult, but enjoyable if you believe they are enjoyable. That's how life in the countryside began. I expected it to be difficult for a city person like me, but the people at the branch office were pleasantly friendly and accommodating. Many of our clients in the surrounding area were acquaintances with whom we had been doing business for a long time. And, unlike when I was in the head office, we could do consistent business without being pressed to expand new sales. As a result, the office climate was pretty relaxed, and I was able to leave on time every day with nearly no overtime. Many of the colleagues around me were nice, and we talked a lot. Young female employees asked me about Hell's Kitchen and the Upper East Side. The older guys asked me about West Village and Midtown. I didn't know much about these areas, but when I told a story with a twist, everyone was willing to listen. I was also able to get some useful information about the local area. And I was able to live a different life than I had when I was working at the headquarters, where I felt squeezed for time and responsibility. What had most changed was that I now had less money to spend and could live more comfortably than before. I used to give my mom $1,000 a month, including rent, but the company now paid the rent. Even though I was giving $1,000 to my mom, I felt that my life had become easier. I called my mom from time to time, and she was relieved that the food bills had decreased since I had left. When I heard my mom's cheerful voice, I felt relieved. I was sure she felt the same way. One day, I was returning home after working overtime, which was unusual for me. It was past 8 p.m. when I arrived at my apartment. I parked my scooter in the dimly lit bicycle parking lot and, in a daze, put my hand on the door without unlocking it. Surprisingly, the door opened. Huh? Did I forget to lock the door? It was not as dangerous as in the city, but forgetting to lock the door was worrisome. But, luckily, there was no valuable thing in my room. Despite this, I promised myself that I would be more cautious the next time. When I entered my room, I noticed someone in the dark. I looked closely and saw a woman wearing a skirt. She was standing on a stepladder with a string or fabric dangling from the loft railing. I don't believe in ghosts, but the sight was so bizarre that I couldn't help but stand still. Then, the woman noticed the noise and looked at me. "What?" she shouted. "What?" I shouted too. We were both perplexed and exchanged the same word, but that wasn't the point. I instantly noticed a different atmosphere in the room. I was taken aback, but then I observed the woman had a problem. "Are you?" For the most part, I couldn't believe she was hanging her stuff to dry. This woman was about to take her own life. Before I could realize that, my body was moving. I rushed into the room. I motioned her to stop with my hands in front of her. "Calm down for a second. Could you get down from there, please?" I knew I couldn't let her stay like that, so I attempted to persuade her. The woman kept staring at me with a blank expression on her face. Eventually, she understood my words, removed her hand from the cloth, and stepped down from the stepladder. I opened the lid of the plastic bottle I was holding and offered it to her. Well, why don't you drink this and calm down a bit?" I handed it to her. She sat helplessly after getting off the stepladder. She was sipping the drink I had bought her, but she appeared to be drowsy. I hid the stepladder in the corner of the room so she wouldn't have that idea again. Here I was able to calm down a little and calmly assess the situation. I saw that I had come into the room without taking off my shoes. I hurriedly took off my shoes and said, "I was in a hurry, so I didn't take off my shoes. I had no idea I had to take them off here." The woman was looking at me. "I am a resident of this apartment too. I guess I entered the wrong room." The woman was silent and listened to my excuse. At this moment, I realized that my behavior was outrageous. This apartment was for singles, so this woman lived alone. Even though it wasn't my intention, I entered her room without taking off my shoes. "I'm sorry for the trouble I have caused. I will come back later to apologize." With that said, as I turned my back to leave the room, she called out to me. "Oh, thank you very much. If you hadn't come in like that, I would be—" "No, I'm the one who caused you trouble, so you don't have to thank me. Excuse me." I rushed out of the room and went outside to find Building 2 written on the side of the apartment. I was living in Building 1. When I returned to my room, I was panicking. Without changing my clothes, I took out a can of beer from the refrigerator and drank it all at once. I changed my clothing and opened another beer after I'd calmed down a little. But why was she doing that? She appeared to be on the verge of committing suicide in any case. How could I be so calm after seeing such a thing? I didn't tell her my name, and I didn't ask hers, but that vision stayed with me, and I couldn't help but be intrigued. I was worried that she hadn't considered doing the same thing outside of her room, so I paid close attention and watched the news. I wanted to help her because she seemed to be so troubled, but at the same time, I also wanted to see her again. Since that day, every time I left my apartment, I looked for her. I kept doing that until one evening when I noticed her on the path leading to our flat from the main street outside. There was no way I could have mistaken her because I had been looking for her for days. As I stared at her, she noticed my gaze too. "Oh!" I heard her voice. I was honestly relieved to see her alive. But when she saw me, she was surprised. She had not expected to see me again. I ran up to her without thinking. "I'm so happy to see you again. Hey, if it's okay with you, do you have a minute?" If she was considering doing what she intended to do the other day, I knew I couldn't leave her alone. And I also genuinely wanted to talk with her. She was a little puzzled by my sudden invitation, but she gave me a small nod. I immediately looked for a place, but there was no way I could find a fancy restaurant in such a rural area. What I found was a typical bar. There was nowhere else to go, and I reasoned that it would be simpler to talk in a busy area than a quiet one. So I urged her to enter the bar with me. The bar was fairly crowded. We sat at the bar, which was rather vacant because many customers came in large groups to this type of place. I figured no one would mind us here. We ordered beer and started by introducing ourselves. Her name was Amelia Lee, and she was the same age as me. Amelia worked as an office worker at a nearby machine parts factory. I was talking to her one-sidedly at first, but as the drinks flowed, Amelia gradually began to talk to me. She was an only child, and her parents had already passed away, leaving her alone in the world. However, Amelia had a boyfriend whom she met at work and started dating. She was even thinking of marrying him. But one day, she told him that she was physically unable of having children because of a sickness she contracted as a child. Her boyfriend left her without a second thought. Amelia was depressed and saw no reason to live. As a result, she began to believe that she would never be able to find happiness in her life. Finally, she decided to take her own life. Amelia spoke with tears in her eyes. After she finished her story, I told her about myself. I told her how my boss had blamed me for a mistake at work and forced me to accept the blame, so I ended up moving here. But I told her how much I liked living here and how much it helped me relax. I noticed that quite a bit of time had passed and it was getting close to closing time. Surprisingly, the discussion flowed smoothly and we got to know each other fairly well. On the way home, "If you don't mind, could we continue to meet like this from time to time?" I asked Amelia. It took a lot of guts to say this, but since I'd never have the chance again, I went ahead and said it. Then she smiled a little. "Sure, I would love to. I would like to meet you again and talk about many things." And she said so. We exchanged contact information and I walked her back to her apartment. After that, we had several opportunities to meet together. As we kept repeating such things, half a year had passed, and we grew closer. Our friendship had progressed to the point where we visited each other's rooms and ate dinner together every day. From the outside, we may have appeared to be decent lovers, but none of us could express it to the other, so we stayed friends rather than lovers. I realized Amelia was wary of partnerships because of her sad history, but I wanted to move on from our current unstable relationship. Simply put, I was in love with Amelia. And after we had dinner together as usual, I boldly told Amelia how I felt. "Can I talk to you for a minute? There's something I need to talk to you about." She sat down in front of me, looking a little nervous at my attitude. "What is it? What's going on?" I took a big, deep breath. Yeah, it might sound too late to say this, but I love you, Amelia. I want you to go out with me with a marriage in mind. I couldn't find good words, and it was tedious to speak in a roundabout manner, so I told her my feelings honestly. She looked down. The glimpse of her face did not look pleased, and in a voice that sounded like it was squeezing out, "I'm sorry." She said so. I was disappointed that I wasn't suitable for her. "But I want you to know that I don't hate you." She was in tears. I can't. I can't have children even if we get married. So I can't respond to your feelings for me." I was about to say that I didn't care for children, but I realized those words would not comfort her. I think I understood well that the fact that she couldn't have children was very painful for her. As I watched her continue to cry, "I understand how you feel, Amelia, but my feelings won't change. I will keep proposing to you over and over until you decide to marry me." With that, I left the room. We no longer had meals in each other's rooms after that, although we still had occasions to meet outside. Each time, I expressed my desire to marry her, but no matter how many times I told her, she always said no. I was troubled. I wasn't proposing to Amelia in order to make her sad. Words alone were not enough to convey how serious I was. I realized that I had to convey my feelings through my attitude and actions. One day I took a vacation and went to the city hall. And I got a form. I obtained a document required for marriage. I took the form and went back to my apartment. When I arrived at the apartment, I stormed into her room. I had already confirmed that she was in her room at that hour. I stood in front of the door and rang the doorbell. The door opened and she came out. "Oh, what's up?" She stared at me with a puzzled expression. I silently showed her the paper in my hand. "Is this for marriage?" "Yeah. This is how I feel about you. I'm happy to just be with you. I want you to marry me." She asked, her voice trembling. "Really? Are you sure you're okay with me?" I wanted to tell her that it had to be because of my actions up to this point, but I just nodded silently. Tears began to well up in her eyes. I couldn't stop loving her and hugged her. Then I whispered in her ear, "It needs to be you. Let's start a family together." I found myself unable to stop the tears from flowing. Then Amelia and I got married. After we married, our corporate housing was upgraded from an apartment to a larger house. She was happy to have a bright house with windows on all sides. Then, after persuading her, I took her to an obstetrician for an examination. The results showed that she could conceive despite her difficulties. She then began fertility treatment. It was a painful treatment, but Amelia did her best. Then, one day, Amelia wasn't feeling well, and when she went to the doctor, to her surprise, she found out that she was pregnant. It seemed like a gift from heaven. When I found out that Amelia was pregnant, I started doing all the cleaning to relieve her of the stress. I also checked with the company to see if there was a maternity leave system for male employees. The manager of the General Affairs Department told me, "Although there is no maternity leave system for men, parental leave is allowed. However, the current situation is that it is rarely used. Perhaps you could be the first to do it, setting an example for others to follow." I was kind of pushed to do so. When I told Amelia about this, "You've already begun to love your child excessively," she teased me. Amelia took good care of herself and ate enough nourishment, and regular checkups revealed that the baby was developing normally. And the months passed. "Thank you for all your hard work. Thanks to you, we now have a healthy baby girl." "But you helped me too, right? It's not just about me. This is the result of our affection for one another." Saying that, we looked at our child sleeping in the newborn room. "I never thought I would be able to see my own child with my own eyes. It's like a dream come true." Amelia's eyes were red and swollen. There was evidence on her face that she had been crying a lot after giving birth. "Speaking of which, isn't it about time for your mother to arrive at the train station?" "Oh, that's right. Sorry, but I have to go pick her up." "Don't worry, it's not time for her to leave this room yet." "Anyway, I'll be back soon." Actually, I called my mom the day before to inform her that we had a baby. "I'll be there tomorrow." And that's how she came to visit us quickly. When my mom arrived at the hospital, she was holding her grandchild in her arms, a happy smile on her face. Then I saw her off, went back to the hospital, and went to Amelia's room. "You have been quite active since the birth of your child, haven't you?" "Forget about me. What about you? You must be exhausted after giving birth, right?" "Yeah, I'm tired, but I feel amazingly fulfilled." "I see." I suddenly asked something that popped into my head. "Hey, can I ask you something weird?" "What do you mean, weird?" Have you stopped feeling guilty now?" Amelia took my hand in hers. "Well, I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't entered my apartment by mistake that day. Maybe I wouldn't have felt this happy. If this is fate, then you were my destiny. So, let me thank you again. Thank you so much." Fate. If it weren't for the troubles I had at my ex-office, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met you either. For me, you are my destiny. We looked at each other saying that and laughed together. I had no clue when I initially arrived in this town that I would be able to laugh so naturally. The next day, I was sitting with Amelia on a bench overlooking the hospital courtyard, cradling my unnamed child. Amelia's face had a motherly appearance about it. We were in the calm flow of time in the warm spring sunlight. It felt as if the world we were in, as well as the future, shone brightly.